Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. Ukraine War News Update for the 16th of December 2024. Before we go on to the usual beginnings, the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before, let me just remind you of the Trucks Under the Christmas Tree campaign for 15 trucks for Ukraine, all to be used in a variety of ways. We have so far at ATP Geopolitics at number one still. Let's keep that going. Let's see if we can reach 20,000 euros to get 2 trucks first out of all of these wonderful channels here. We have raised for 1 truck. We are halfway along raising for a second truck. Those trucks for our campaign. First one will be used as a kind of multiple launch rocket system mini version of that, and the second one is for deploying troops, delivering ammunition and supplies for the 119th Brigade, 166th Battalion in the Liman area. So you can check the videos out for that, clicking on the link below, and you can donate. Thank you so much to all the many people, 207 people indeed, who have donated so far. You guys are absolute freaking legends. Right, moving on then, hits and losses, all the usual caveats apply. You can find the caveats in the description to the video below. 1,070 personnel lost. That's still high, but the lower end of the very high range that we are used to. So still above 1,000. 12 tanks is a high number of tanks to have lost in a day over the daily average. 29 armoured personnel vehicles, well over the daily average, and 23 artillery systems over the daily average. So that's getting back to the sorts of figures we are used to, or at least somewhat. I keep talking about how deep are Russia's pockets in terms of equipment. Something we'll talk about in the last section actually is where I see the war at the moment very quickly. I want to do a whole video on this. But yeah, before we get there, let's just see the others. So 82 vehicles and fuel tanks lost is a very high number in that category, and 2 pieces of special equipment. So that is a fairly good day for the Ukrainians. Of course, lots of caveats applied, particularly personnel number is obviously much more of an unknown than these other categories that are much more easily verifiable. Having said that, Andrew Perpetua's loss list, he's well behind. He said it's just huge amounts to do and huge numbers of vehicles on those lists every single day. He is in the midst of trying to get those loss lists up and running. One of his Turchny colleagues here, Erlen, says Russia is running out of officers. Newly graduated cadets with no experience are being put in charge of airborne battalions. Okay, let's go to where I was going to go to later. We'll reference this back again because it's so super important. So how does either side win the war? My opinion is, really quickly, there are 3 elements. 1, boots on the ground, people. You can use missiles and guided glide bombs to destroy cities, but you can't take them over unless you've got people to go and secure that area. So you need people, essentially. Which side has the greatest number of people that they can throw at this problem? The advantage there is massively towards Russia, as we know. But they're not fighting for their existential future in the way that Ukraine as a country is. And so therefore, does Russia have a higher threshold for there's no point using up all of these people to try and win that war abroad, whereas Ukraine will be like, we're happier, scare quotes, to use up all those people to win this war because otherwise we don't exist, right? So there are different thresholds there, but Ukraine have far fewer people that they can draw on, but at the same time Russia's numbers aren't infinite, which is why they are drawing on North Koreans, and that's why I think North Korean troops are such a problem. We're going to talk about that in a second. Ukraine potentially could draw on foreign troops as well, and that's why I think it's super important to be able to get allied troops into, say, Western Ukraine. I think that's really important to alleviate the pressure on Ukraine's mobilization woes. Okay, so you got people. Second one is equipment. Who has the most equipment? Who can build the most equipment? Okay. So here you have Russia having a massive advantage with all the equipment it had previously, and the stockpiles, those deep stockpiles. So they've got a huge advantage over Ukraine. Ukraine have done a really good job of having an asymmetrical attrition. So I think they have attrited far more Russian equipment than the Ukrainians have lost, but there are so many more pieces of equipment that the Russians have. It seems this endless supply. However, it is finite. So the question is, then we're getting to a point where it's going to become a game of who has the greatest industrial capacity. And the next point. So the third point is the deep economic pockets. Okay. So those points 2 and 3 for Ukraine depend entirely upon Western aid. And that depends entirely upon Western political will. So the amount of money we need to provide to Ukraine isn't huge in the whole grand scheme of things. But like I keep saying, each country has their own political and economic woes at the moment. We've all come out the back of a COVID pandemic and an energy crisis. And so people are struggling to find that money. And the UK, for example, we've got a 22 billion black hole. Okay, what do we do about that? Well, we'd love to keep providing Ukraine with stuff, but then how does that fit with the electorate who want their own welfare system sorted out and education, schools paid for, etc., etc.? And the problem is, even though it's the right thing to do is to support Ukraine, if that doesn't get you elected in next time round, you've got a problem. Because you know that's the right thing to do, but your electorate doesn't quite understand that and struggles, and they would see the smaller localized things as more important than the larger global security things. And so therefore, you might get punished for helping Ukraine too much. Okay, and that's the problem, because if the political will was there, then we all have the money technically, but there are difficult questions to be had in each of those countries. Russia, on the other hand, has an economy that is far more resilient than we had originally envisaged. They're on a wartime footing. They can get away with supporting the Russian war machine as long as they are getting, I think, hydrocarbon money for energy and natural resources like grain, etc., etc. And that's going to be where you hammer Russia. Yes, sanctions are really super important. We need to squeeze those sanctions as much as possible. But they are way more resilient than we had originally thought. So the issue there is how deep are Russia's pockets, and how long can they keep delving into those pockets, and how deep are the West's pockets in supporting Ukraine. This is where the Trump administration is going to be super important. So that's where we're at, and there's just unknowns. And there are some days where I'm like dooming for Ukraine because I just don't think there's a political will there, and I think Russia have moved their economy away from the West, away from Europe, to kind of global South, Eurasia, China. Like I've said from the beginning of the war, the only way Russia will prevail in this war is with the help of China. Now, I've said previously, like in terms of military aid, but actually economically speaking, like Russia can keep going on if China and India. People can laugh about BRICS, but at the moment, I don't want to get too much. I'm going to save this for a separate video, but. If you start replacing, if you start sanctioning Russia too much, then Russia don't buy American stuff, then they don't have American dollars. So people start working, if they're secondary sanctions, then actually that can damage America to the point where these people are using other currencies, and then trade deficits, and then national debt, and all sorts of things get affected, and it becomes a little bit tricky, and Russia will be able to sustain the war given the support of all these other economies that are then becoming more and more potent. People laugh about BRICS, but in the G20, the G7, the amount of G7 out of the G20, so the 7 most powerful nations, now the other 13, the G13 if you like, now have a greater combined GDP than the G7, I think. Something like that. So you've got a greater distribution of wealth and GDP around the globe compared to what it used to look like. And I think Russia can tap into that and get support outside of the initial power structures. And I think that's deeply worrying. So those are the three components. So when we look at these, so each of the data points that we look at needs to fit into, okay, which one of these three is that, and how does it show things are going? So here we have Russia running out of officers. Newly graduated cadets with no experience are being put in charge of airborne battalions. This is your people problem. And Russia has a real severe people problem. But then, of course, as we know, so do Ukraine. So 23-year-old airborne Spetsnaz Lieutenant Lieutenant Alexievich, commander of the Spetsnaz group of the 215th Reconnaissance Battalion, 98th Guards Airborne Division. So Spetsnaz is Special Forces of the Airborne, so the VDV. So this is best of the best. But he graduated in December 23 and was eliminated in Ukraine on the 12th of November 2024. So my goodness, for being in charge of Special Forces of the VDV, this guy's got to be good. But he only graduated in December 2023 and he died less than a year later. So that then leads us to believe that Russia is struggling in terms of troops. Then we hear that there's been a spike in the number of Russian attacks in the Kursk region. 57 Russian army assaults yesterday, I believe. So then we are looking at what's going on there. Well, in an interview with CBS News on December the 15th, Ukraine's ambassador, Makarova, said that hundreds of North Korean troops are fighting alongside Russian troops in Kursk. So Russians are struggling for troops. They are getting in North Korean troops. That is now definitely happening. This is my issue here, is if Russia have the ability to draw from 100,000 North Korean troops, and they might be crap, right? They might be ill-trained, ill-equipped, not the right fit for the job at hand, but they can just about get away with being used somewhat effectively. They can charge positions, take land, and be used by the Russians. Then this is a resource that Ukraine doesn't have access to. Ukraine can't pull 100,000 from somewhere else. So this is an asymmetry that Russia can really... If I was Russia, I would be going hard on getting North Korean troops. I'd be getting as many damn North Korean troops as possible. Keep my own economy going. Don't want to take too many people from my economy. Don't want to national mobilize. Be politically and economically suicidal. Get North Korean troops. Pay them in energy. Yep, okay, we've got, superfluous amount of gas and oil. We can pay you in that. Don't have to use dollars, don't have to use any kind of payment. We'll pay you in oil, give us humans. And that is why I think the North Korean issue is a bigger problem than people think. Right. Now, there's all this is blurred out luckily, but there's lots of video footage going around of this line of troops laid out in all dead in a field in Kursk. Sightings of North Korean troops at the Kursk front lines are reported more and more often, but Russia and its allies are taking every precaution to hide this evidence. According to the commander of the Magyar's Birds Brigade, his drone operators were able to spot Russian and North Korean soldiers killed in action in Kursk, laid out in a field, ready. One presumes to be taken away. I won't show you that video fully. A Ukraine commander publishes an unverified video of what he says is North Korea's war dead drone. Meister Magyar says Kursk region still warm Sunday morning raid, one of a dozen mass raids today. So it fits into Kursk being really hot at the moment. Specifically here, 22 Koreans mixed with swamp reptiles, Russians. Okay, so we have that picture from above there. Flash that up. Those are the dead lined up there. And I had this. I hate it when it does it. Anyway, Special Kherson Cat says collection point for dead Russians and North Koreans on the Kursk front, and that's what you've heard him say. Here, the North Koreans were mixed with the Russians. Once again, went on attack together with the snow like cockroaches. Video from the FPV drone of the 414th Separate Regiment. The quality is not very good. After each wave, 4 to 5 Koreans arrive on buggies to collect and line up the bodies, as in the video, and to mask the faces of the dead. In the video of a friendly Mavic, one of these Korean buggies is meandering with those already killed after the FPV attack on the infantry. So that's that's what's going on. That's how they've got the footage there. And then we have more footage here. I'm just going to pause that. North Korean soldiers are actively used in human wave assaults. They use tactics from 70 years ago, is a quote here from a Ukrainian soldier. Don't rely on drones and carry weapons like most in their guns. So these are really old, I don't know how old now. What will be 2024? They're probably 80-year-old rifles, 70-year-old. A weakness and bravery, that's their approach. So being used in really old school meat wave attacks, not well equipped, possibly not trained enough in what they need to be. but still having an effect. They still are human beings that the Ukrainians need to expend their own lives and their own resources in attriting. So DPRK units are being replenished after losses in the assaults in the Kursk region, according to Ukrainian intelligence. So they're cycling through them. They are throwing them into battle. They're getting killed, and they're replenishing them. How long can that go on? Well, that is the question. And that's a huge, huge challenge for the Ukrainians. So during December the 14th and 15th, at least 30 North Koreans were killed or wounded. 3 soldiers went missing. Assault groups are being replenished with fresh personnel, in particular from the 94th Separate Brigade. It's a claim there from the Ukrainians. And then we have this Kursk region after each wave. 4 to 5 attacks. That's what we heard previously from Special Kherson Cat. And then the final one on this. So Ukrainian servicemen comments about the North Korean attacks on the Kursk front. So it's a quote from a Ukrainian. From what I saw yesterday, it seemed like the Koreans were not providing first aid to the wounded. I saw a scene. An FPV flew up to a group of 3 Koreans. 2 fell and did not get up, but showed signs of life. The third looked at them, stood, waited for the others to come up, and went with them further across the field. At the same time, individual Koreans were gathering their own in the field and dragging them on stretchers along the ground back the same route they had come up. I saw one crowd of those still alive walking parallel to the stream of those who were dragging the bodies, a kind of conveyor belt of death. In other words, as the people going towards the contact line were walking, coming back the other way were lines of stretchers being, injured, being dragged by their comrades as a kind of like conveyor belt of death, as he says. Sometimes I watched the shell explode 20 meters from their groups, to which they did not react in any way and continued to walk at the same pace. In a photo, the moment when one of the groups got tired of walking across the field under fire and sat down to rest. The impression is that they still don't understand what to fear in war. Fascinating insight there. Of course, you can question whether it's true, etc., but yeah. So Andrew Perpetua's thoughts on this. The Russian government are saying we have manpower problems. Russian military is saying we have manpower problems. Russian soldiers, we have manpower problems. People on Twitter, Russia has infinite manpower and will last forever. The truth is probably somewhere in between. Like Russia has manpower problems. We know that from all of the data points we've been looking at, from the age of the people, from both either insanely young people being put in charge of entire, regiments or whatever, entire like special force groups like we just seen, or really old people being thrown onto the front line, convicts, mercenaries from abroad, and North Koreans. All of this tells us that there are manpower problems that Russia is facing. But Russia is incredibly adaptive. So how, for my opinion, has been that, yeah, we shouldn't dismiss that, though. Those are still humans you can give a gun and throw at the enemy. The question is, how long can all of that go on for? And at the moment, I don't know the answer because it's dependent on how many North Koreans are able to be thrown into this war. So do not underestimate the importance of the North Koreans, because it enables, I've said this right from the beginning we heard about North Koreans, it enables the Russians to prolong the war. And the longer the war goes on, the more likely it is that Russia are going to prevail, whatever prevailing means, right? Whether it means a concession of more territory or this or that. But Russia will prevail more likely the longer the war, the longer they can maintain the war. And the same with vehicles. They are running short of loads of vehicles from all those other data points we're looking at. Tracked garden sheds, buggies, motorcycles, etc., etc. On the one hand, that means they're kind of close to capitulation. But instead of capitulating, what Russians do is just adapt. As long as there's a political will in the Kremlin, they'll just continue throwing stuff. So, yep, okay, we run out of infantry. We've run out of tanks. Brilliant. Let's, or we run out of infantry fighting vehicles. Let's build track garden sheds out of tanks. We run out of tanks. Okay, we'll do this. We'll bolt on that onto that chassis and do that. Okay, we run out of those. Okay, we'll get golf buggies from China. Okay, we get motorcycles. Okay, we'll send people on bicycles. It doesn't matter as long as we've got the people. We'll just keep. So that's why I say, you've got the people issue, the equipment and munitions and rockets and artillery shells and tanks and IFVs, and then the deep pockets of or the economy and how much money you've got. Those are your three things, but you can mess around with them lots. You can adapt. Even if you kind of run out critically of certain things, then Russia just find a way around that by throwing other things at the Ukrainians. How resourceful can the Ukrainians be? Well, we know they're very innovative and resourceful, but a lot of their resourcefulness depends on how much support they get from their allies. So this is like I said again right at the beginning of the war, and I use the term proxy war not in a pejorative sense, not in the like, oh, we have manipulated Ukraine to go to war with Russia because we wanted to go to Russia. That's not my definition of the proxy war. I think there is a proxy war going on, but what that means is all the allies that have coalesced around Ukraine because Russia attacked, we didn't, provoke that. And, I'm not talking about like NATO expansionism and all that. That's a bogus argument. Russia invaded Ukraine. We all came to assist Ukraine. Russia has assistance from North Korea, Iran, and China, and economically from other nations like India and Turkey. Well, even though Turkey's also helping Ukraine. So you got all of these countries involved in what I would declare is a world war that is also a proxy war, as in we're all supporting these two sides in one way or the other. Like all these different nations are supporting one of these two sides, and sometimes both of these two sides, and they're fighting it out. But they will last as long as we all here are willing to support them on both sides, and that's where we're at. Now, Russia forces, so where Russia's struggling with building infantry fighting vehicles and tanks at the requisite number, they are getting drones. They're building Shahed drones at incredible numbers, and the Russian forces have tripled their use of drones in southern Ukraine. We know that Ukraine has done this as well, as they've intensified their offensive toward the border with Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. Artillery shelling has also nearly doubled, signaling a significant escalation, according to the Ukrainian military. So again, which side can outproduce the other in terms of artillery ammunition, and in terms of drones, in terms of missiles, attack drones, etc., etc. Andrew Perpetua talking about getting equipment and what's the most useful. Instead of investing gajillions of dollars developing crappy self-propelled guns that barely carry any ammo and often weigh obscene amounts of tons but can shoot and scoot, so he's talking about Caesars, Archers, Panzerhaubitze 2000s, etc., etc. But can shoot and scoot. Countries should be investing in ultra lightweight, long range towed guns that specialize in push and bush. In other words, you push them around or you pull them around and then you hide them in a bush. Make a howitzer the crew can lift and push around into firing positions without requiring a truck to back it all the way. Make a few 105mm with a sexy long barrel. That is what we need, like some $20 million 60-ton SPG, not some $20 million 60-ton SPG. Give me a howitzer that the crew don't need to hide behind a glass wall to reload. So there you go. That's his opinion there. And finally on this section, Ukraine has claimed responsibility for blowing up a railway track next to Ulyanovsk motor plant. The process of weakening the logistics facilities. Let's just play that. The process of weakening the logistics facilities that Russia uses to wage a genocidal war against Ukraine continues, said a statement from Ukraine's main intelligence directorate. So a bit more railway sabotage going on there, which is exactly what Ukraine need to continue to do. Now, in terms of distant strikes, Russia sent 49 drones into Ukraine, another fairly significant wave. 27 taken out with conventional means, 19 lost by electronic warfare, and 3 drones lost in 3 drones were still in Ukrainian airspace when these stats were out, which is all 49. So potentially 3 got through, but they were still in airspace. But looking at the rest of those, likelihood is they were taken out. Right. We had Zelensky claiming that this week alone, Russia used nearly 630 guided aerial bombs, guided glide bombs, around 550 drone strikes and over 100 missiles of various types against Ukraine. I mean, it was a pretty horrific week in terms of Russian strikes on Ukraine. And if Russia can continue doing that and Ukraine doesn't. Well, of course, Ukraine has been hitting certain sites. So a few that we heard about the other night, Razman stated that 3 drones struck Grozny today, so this was 2 nights ago. In response, he allegedly already destroyed 200 Ukrainian fascists. This is coming from the Ramzan Kadyrov. I'm sure they're just trolling Kadyrov with these drones now. So Kadyrov's making these big claims about, taking out Ukrainians in revenge, but I do wonder about the utility in striking at Grozny myself. Now, Ukraine has destroyed a Russian ammo depot in Donetsk Oblast. This happened a couple of nights ago as well. There's just a bit more information coming out. This is in Markinia in Donetsk Oblast a few days ago. SBU drones successfully attacked a Russian ammunition depot near that occupied village. There were thousands of ammunition rounds for armored personnel carriers, tanks, anti-tank guided missiles, mines, grenades, millions of rounds of ammunition, etc., etc. So, this was a significant strike, and it was, visible from a very long way away. I mean, that is one big explosion. So just to clarify that was a significant hit the other night. And what else do we have? Massive explosion. Oh yeah, this has happened in Syria. Actually, this isn't anything to do with the war in Ukraine, but I just want to give you a sense of how insane this was. Massive explosion seen in northwestern Syria near the city of Tartus following an Israeli strike against a munitions depot, with the explosion reported to have been so large and it measured 3.0 on magnitude on the Richter scale by nearby seismic sensors. Quite incredible. So that's what happens when you hit a massive ammunition storage unit. Now, again, when we're talking about those 3 aspects, people, stuff, economy, the stuff side of things, who can produce the most missiles and drones and throw them at the other side. That's really important. It's really important that Ukraine are building missiles and drones to scale. We are hearing that they have built 100 Peklo, these new Hell, Peklo is the word for Hell, these new Hell drone missiles. I believe then you got the Palantir, they're scaling them out, so 100 in the last 3 months. That would need to be like, tenfold increase in that ideally. And Ukraine need to be absolutely hammering the Russians with those consistently if they want to prevail. Remember, this war seems to just be dilemma after dilemma after dilemma. So one of the things about hitting the refineries is that you are cutting the production capacity or refining capacity or storage capacity of the Russians in terms of hydrocarbons. One of the law of unintended consequences of that is that if you starve the Russians of the ability to produce, refine, store transit that oil or indeed gas, then that starves the world market of that supply, and it can push the price up. In other words, what you can annoyingly get is that by hitting the oil infrastructure, you end up putting the price up of oil, and Russia get more money for the less oil that they are producing and exporting, and it ends up being the same. That might happen. So for Russia to be screwed over in terms of hydrocarbons export, and this is really, really important, we need Saudi Arabia to do what they might be doing. OPEC and Russia, I don't think, are seeing eye to eye fully at the moment. Russia's in OPEC plus, and there are rumors that OPEC are going to just flood global marketplaces with lots of oil to bring the price down. You bring the price down of oil, and Russia gets hit. Russia needs the price of oil to be up. At the moment, it's $75 a barrel, something like that. Ideally, Russia, that needs to be like $35 a barrel, and then Russia is properly screwed. And that will also need Trump to come in and drill, baby, drill, which, the US is doing anyway. But, again, that's your third element, which is the money, the deep pockets. And it's about hammering each of those and helping Ukraine out with each of those. Okay, moving on to other bits and pieces. So it's been reported that Ukrainian counterattack on Novotroitska, so this is by the Kursk area where there's been a counterattack. There's been a couple of units that have been thrown into there. It's intensified. There's now also an attack on Russian positions in Shevchenko, so that's that village south of Kursk. So Shevchenko, you can see it there. Kursk is up there. Reports suggest that Ukraine has employed a large force of brigade strength, which could be 3,000 to 5,000 soldiers. So they are having some success in pushing the Russians back there. That's really good news. Reports recently claimed Russian forces entered Sumy region, so that's the north, basically that's going to be somewhere near the Kursk sector, because that's Sumy. Sumy is south of there. Reports recently claimed Russian forces entered the Sumy region, but Ukraine Special Operations Forces revealed the truth. On December the 10th, a Russian sabotage group attempted to cross the border, but was stopped by Special Forces operators. The sinking of those two Russian tankers yesterday on the Kerch Strait may cause significant I don't think there's any may in it. Will cause significant environmental damage, according to Greenpeace. Well, let's have a look at that. Greenpeace environmentalists are sounding the alarm. The accident involving Russian tankers in the Black Sea could lead to one of the largest man-made disasters. Each of the sunken Russian tankers may have been carrying up to 5,000 tons of oil products. A spill of this volume of oil products into the Black Sea could result in one of the largest man-made disasters in the region. The particular danger lies in the direction of the winds and currents, which are currently pushing the pollution northeast, making it extremely difficult to contain the consequences under the current weather conditions, Greenpeace stated. 13 sailors were evacuated from the first tanker, one of whom died. The evacuation of the crew from the second tanker, Volgoneft 239, which ran aground 80 meters from the shore near the port of Taman, has been suspended due to poor weather conditions and darkness. There are 14 people on board the tanker. Well, that was yesterday. I don't know what the latest is on that, but it's not going to be great, is it, environmentally speaking. Now, remaining on ships, a Chinese cargo ship, the Yipeng 3, has now, I think there's a bit of conclusion, potentially. This is MS Pearce saying that they allegedly damaged critical telecommunications cables in the Baltic Sea, under orders from Russian intelligence. So these are the two cables that were severed, dragging anchor. A ship reportedly deployed its anchor to sever the cables in November, impacting connections vital to Central Europe. That is the claim of MS Pearce here, and no doubt others. And of course, that's Russia doing that. What are we doing in response? We need to be much more formal. Going back to, you've got an electorate that aren't too happy about, potentially aren't too happy about money going to Ukraine when you've got your own problems. If we very clearly signal to our population that we're at war with Russia, then this becomes slightly more acceptable to say, right, we can point to stuff like this. Russia have just done this, right? They've attacked our communication systems, our European communication systems. We're at war with Russia, therefore we are helping out Ukraine with more money. We just need to be a little bit more honest, I think, with our populations. Rather than hiding behind the idea that we can't declare we're at war, we need to say it in all the ways other than saying a formal declaration of war. You can say, we are involved in a hybrid war with Russia right now, and this is happening in Ukraine, and Russia have done this to us, this to us, this to us. An explosive in an airport in Birmingham, in the DHL warehouse in Birmingham. The assassination attempts of Sergei Skripal, the assassination of Alexander Litvinenko, and then the warehouse that was burnt down in London. I'm talking from a British point of view here. This was all done by Russia. This is what we're dealing with. That's why we are supporting Ukraine. We are effectively at war, or we're involved in hybrid war, if you don't want to declare the official war situation. Now, going back to both the economic thing, going back to the economic pot of your 3 pots of the 3 categories of how each side may prevail in a war. Russia is discussing the return of food stamps. The idea was supported in the State Duma, according to Russian media. They propose introducing food cards for unprotected categories of the population due to high inflation and rising prices, which hits the low-income groups the hardest. Now, this is another data point to show that they are struggling. The question is this all right? Can they just adapt to that? If the population is so pliable, so compliant, that they just take rations and don't forget how things were better like 10 years ago, then this happens and it's not too much of a problem. Like, it depends on the resilience of the Russian people, where resilience can also mean their ability to just take it. Yeah, well, that is resilience, isn't it? Ability to take it on the chin and not moan. And the resilience of the Russian economy, if they can adapt and they're saying, we're all right. Like, yeah, from the Kremlin's point of view, the oligarchs still got enough money. People in the State Duma still got enough money. We're all right, thank you. Some of the poorest in society, life sucks for them. But if they're not going to get up and get angry about it, then who gives a toss? And we'll just continue with the war. Thank you very much. Whereas that in the UK, for example, because we live in a democracy, you'd be like kicking out that government as soon as you possibly could, or going rioting on the streets. In Ukraine, in Russia, that doesn't happen. Okay, what do we have here? So Anton Gerashenko reports the head of Russia's Duma's Defense Committee, Andrei Kartopolov, says Ukraine, which has rejected the idea of a Christmas truce, if she does agree to one, cannot be trusted. I mean, goodness me, that's projection, isn't it? Russia are very have a distinct form for treaties and agreements. And breaking them. Now, Trump's team seeks permanent end to the Russia-Ukraine war, according to Mike Waltz, security advisor. US President-elect Donald Trump's team is discussing how to end the Russian-Ukraine war permanently rather than merely pausing it. Trump's pick for National Security Advisor Mike Waltz told CBS yesterday. Problem is that they are also entertaining the Orban's peace initiative as well, and none of that's good for Ukraine. But then Dmitry Kuleba's come out and said this. So Zelensky has one goal: to win the war. Former Foreign Minister Dmitry Kuleba has said. He noted that Trump will struggle to broker a peace deal, but is unlikely to cut military aid to Ukraine. Interesting. According to Kuleba, the war will truly end only when one side outlasts the other. And that's where we get back to those three different segments. Who can outlast the other in terms of boots on the ground, stuff, munitions, weapons, equipment, and the economy, money. Those three things. Who's going to outlast the other? You've got Ukraine and all its allies, and you've got Russia and all its allies. There's your world war. Who's going to win? It's that simple. That's where we're at. We just need to communicate that in the news to say this is a big game of risk, where all of these sides, all of these countries are on this country's side, and all these countries are on this country's side. We're basically all against them. Who's going to outlast the other? This is why this is why it's important to outlast the other side. This is what's at stake in this war. Global security, economy, blah 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 blah. And this is how we can help Ukraine to win, or this is how we can help ourselves to win that global tussle. And this is what, this is why we're doing it, and this is what we're doing. If we're more honest about it, then those pills are easier to swallow. Anyway, that's enough from me. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon. Let me know if you agree or disagree with any of what I've said.